Hey, it's James from Marketing for Restaurants here, and welcome to episode 124 of Secret Sauce, the Restaurant Marketing Podcast. More fun with menu engineering.
Some restaurants are quiet, lose money, and the owner works 70 hours a week. Other restaurants are busy, profitable, and the owners work a few hours a day. What's the difference? They have a secret sauce. Join James from Marketing for Restaurants as he helps you come up with your recipe for restaurant success. Your secret sauce.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. We're back to menu engineering. So we're continuing on where we started in episode 121 with our 7 steps for menu engineering in your restaurant. We only did a couple in that episode. We then went on to the restaurant innovation and creativity model, which I think is really cool and, surprisingly, a fundamental part of the menu engineering process. Far too many people are going with a menu that they've had in their restaurant for 20 years or that restaurants have been trying to serve to customers for 20 years. And there's nothing wrong with that traditional approach, but it means that you're going to be limited in the kind of things that you can talk to your customers about. It doesn't give you anything special. It's not going to really help you with a unique selling proposition. So it's one of those things that you really want to think about, particularly when the innovation and creativity model doesn't just address the kind of things that you're going to put on the menu. It also talks about the kind of things that how you're going to produce those things. What are the processes that you're going to take? You might be able to cut your costs, or you might be able to change the way in which it's delivered. You might be able to speed things up or where it's done. Lots of things that you can do in there to help with the profitability and sustainability of your restaurant. Last episode, we took a small detour to talk to Kaylee Milliken about her new movie, Yelp, or Billion Dollar Bully, which is about Yelp. And this is really interesting. I think the restaurant industry is beset with, you've got Yelp creating all of the issues that they create. TripAdvisor is doing some pretty funky things as well. And of course, we've got the online ordering aggregators with the brandjacking, AdWords arbitrage, all of these kind of practices that make it really hard for the little guy to be able to run a restaurant and to be able to do it profitably. I think, interestingly enough, the tide is slowly turning. We're seeing, so in Perth, I think the Transport Workers Union is taking Uber Eats to court. DoorDash has become under a huge amount of pressure in the United States over their skimming of the tipping, which is pretty dodgy in itself. And there's more and more tools out there to help restaurants to be able to do this disintermediation thing to stop the restaurants coming in between them and their customers, which isn't good for anyone. Don't forget, if you're struggling in your restaurant to get enough customers to make it profitable, then think about talking to Marketing for Restaurants. My big advice would be think about talking to Marketing for Restaurants earlier rather than later. We, tragically enough, find quite a few customers who call us and it's really just too late. If you're going to struggle to make your lease payment tomorrow, there's probably not a lot that we can do to help you. There are a lot of things that we can do to help restaurants and helping them around the world. It was exciting. This week we had our first customer in Belgium sign up. That was pretty exciting. They're now using Forbes, the free online restaurant booking system. We've got Frollo, of course, which is increasing, another new month record for us, which is always cool to see those numbers continuing to go up and up and up. And it is interesting, we've been doing a little bit of market research. One of the biggest issues with Frollo, the free restaurant online ordering system, which some restaurants are saving $500 or $1,000 a month with because they're moving away from companies like Menulog. They're no longer requiring to use them. So these restaurants are saving all of that money and they're building their database. The biggest issue is people look at it and go, where's the trick? And the funny thing is there is no trick. That's all right. We're about to fix that. We're building a new online ordering system. There's going to be a couple of cool features in it. We won't say too much about it just yet, but there's going to be a couple of new features in it and we're actually going to charge for it. So I think that is going to be really interesting. The feedback that we've been getting from our restaurant consultants that we work with, the guys who come up with all of the smart ideas about what the restaurant industry needs, has been really positive. So we're going to release more and more information over time. It's still we're still months away from release, but I think it's going to be a big thing that's going to put the tools in the hands of the small restaurant owner that up until now has only been available to the big boys, and so that's going to be pretty cool. And of course, we do websites and our Marketing Boost. Marketing Boost works really well. How good are our websites? I'd like to think they're pretty good. Remember, we had one customer who the chef left, who we'd work quite closely with in being able to tell their story and what made them unique. A new chef came in, he bought his web designer, didn't take the Google Analytics off, and we still had dealings with the company. So when we were doing the review of the Google Analytics, we found that their traffic had collapsed more than 80%. The sad thing is that chef who's in there is trying to work out what it is that he's doing wrong, when realistically, all it is that his story isn't being told to the kind of people who needs to be hearing it. Remember that your website should be doing the sales and the marketing, that SEO bit, the tricky bit that no one sort of seems to understand. That's the bit that we help with. Yeah, that fundamentally missing in that bit. The website that they've got doesn't even look that good anyway. So it really is one of those things. We pack a lot of value into our $1,000 packages, our $3,000 package, and our $5,000 packages. Huge amount of value so that we can be certain that we're going to be able to put you in the best place possible to be able to achieve a decent return on investment. Enough about that though. The next step in menu engineering is menu costing. Now, this will be completely new to, 95, maybe 99%. Hopefully it's not that bad. But there's so many restaurants out there that we talk to who don't know how much a product costs them to cook up, which, realistically, that has to be complete madness. You can't think of any other industry where they would manufacture a product and sell it without first working out exactly what it is that costs them to build it. So when we look at food costing, there's a couple of things and a couple of ways that we can do it. The first way that you can do it is to look at your percentage food costs. So what you're going to do is you're going to work out all of the things, and there's going to be different ways. Hopefully you're able to get the granularity where you can look at food and bev, not food and bev, but look at them separately. Hopefully you can look at alcoholic versus non-alcoholic. Ideally, you should be able to look at your buy price versus your sale price. But let's just take it at food to start off with. You're going to have a look at your food cost and you're going to divide that into your revenue. And if you spend $3,500 on food and you sell $10,000 worth of food, then your food costs are about 35%. A little bit expensive. You might want to look at that. But there's a big problem with that. And that's a metric that a lot of people kind of run with, or those who do run with metrics. And we've talked about that in the KPIs. But for the menu engineering point of view, you really want to delve a lot deeper into it. And this is where what you're going to do is look at the recipe that you've got for each item and work out the food cost for each and every one of those components that goes into it. So how much does a patty cost? How much do the buns cost? How much does a leaf of lettuce cost? How much does a slice of cheese cost? That is going to give you your build price for the item. And that's pretty important to know. But tragically, it's not all of the way there. There's still a few things that you need to be considering when you're going to be doing the proper costing for each and every one of your menu items. That sort of gives you a raw cost, but I think that there's a lot of value in going a little bit deeper in this. The next step is to add in a labor component. So how long does each item cost as far as preparation goes as well? Because you've now got your two of your major costs, so your wages costs and your food costs. And you might be doing 35%. God, if you're in Australia, you might be doing 45, maybe 50%. You could be up around 80% of your costs just in food and wages. So these are your two big costs. If you've got an item that's really quite fiddly that you're going to spend a lot of time working on, then that menu item really needs to reflect that, because when we get a little bit further down the track, you're going to be looking at, why am I making this item? And I think one of the things that you want to be doing is you want to make every single item fight for its place in that menu. You're not going to be able to have that that conversation about whether an item deserves to be on the menu until you've properly costed out not only the wages cost, but there's a couple of other things that I think are really important to put in there as well. So the first thing is shelf life. How long is it that an item can last? So if you're going to prepare, a batch of desserts, you're obviously going to get economies of scale. If you're going to make one custard and it's going to take you 3 minutes, you'd be much better off, I don't know, and you can tell I'm not a chef, but you'd be much better off potentially making 100. It might only take you a few extra minutes. The ingredients are obviously significantly higher, but you're going to get economies of scale. So you can cut down that labor component. The other thing, when you're looking at shelf life, because if you're going to be preparing items that aren't for tonight, then of course the other thing that you want to factor in is wastage. How many of those items are there that you can only sell tonight, and that sometimes you don't have quite the trade in there? So I know I'm a big fan of the restaurant that will say, this is our special, it's super exciting, sorry, we're sold out. That's going to drive people to come back. It can be a little bit frustrating, certainly can be a little bit frustrating, and it depends on how you're going to do that. But, be straight up with people. We're going to make 100 of these. When they're gone, they're gone. Get in early. That's all I can say. You're going to minimize your wastage, and that can be really cool. Also, ahead of time how many you're going to do. And of course, obviously, if you can sell out of all of those, that's important as well, because you don't want to be throwing any out. But you need to be monitoring your wastage, because that is a significant cost. And items that spoil, items that end up in the bin, you need to be adding that back into the cost of that item, because what we want is a really accurate item price for each and every item. Now, after that, the one last thing that we want to do is opportunity cost. And people go, oh, what's opportunity cost? Well, think of it this way. If you've got a 4-burner kitchen and an item takes 10 minutes on a burner, and you've got another item that takes 2 minutes on a burner, then you can produce 5 of one item in the time that it takes you to do one item. Now, I'm certainly no expert on this, but I have been in kitchens where people are working away, and I've pointed this observation out to people, and they've gone, never really thought about that, or this is an item that we really have to have on the menu. And it's like, well, when you think about what you could be doing, and you've already told me that people complain about the amount of time that it takes you to get an item out, maybe we should be looking at this. And I'm not saying take it off the menu. I'm not saying that. It might be, that's one of your options. The other option is, do you want to go and lease some equipment so that you can turn stuff around a little bit quicker? Is there a way that you can rejig that recipe so that it doesn't take 10 minutes on the burner? These are the things to kind of think about. It's your restaurant, it's your menu. You've got all of the flexibility, and far too often I see people not using these levers to their advantage. They're like, oh, well, this is the way that we've always done it. This is the recipe. There's no better way of doing it. It's like, well, really? Have we really done the best that we can do with it? Next component is pricing. Gotta tell you, super important. One of the big things that you'll be looking at with pricing is how is it that you can maximize the amount of money that you can get for each and every item. Now, to give you an idea about what we're talking about, we're going to run through a little bit of maths, and I know that a podcast isn't a great way of doing this, but it's an important concept that I want you to understand, and we're going to talk about some of the reasons why it's important at the end of this. So, let's just say that you make a burger and it's $10. What happens if you increase the price to $11? Well, one of two things can happen. You can get no change in the volume that you sell, or you could get less. It's unlikely the price is going to go up. That can happen in some areas, like prestige items, but unlikely in food. Unlikely. If the price went up by 10% to $11 and the number that you sold went down by 20%, then that's an elastic demand for your product. So people are really quite price conscious when it comes to that. You might put your price up by 10% to $11 and your revenue the number sold might decrease by 5%. That's an inelastic drop in price. Now let's run through a couple of examples. So you've got a burger that you're selling for $10. It cost you $3.50 to make. and then you increase the price by 10%, but you get and you sell 10 a day, and that decreases by 10%. And so you only sell 9. Now, the interesting thing is that your gross profit before was $65. Your gross profit after the increase is 67.5. So there's almost a unitary amount there because you've had an increase of 10% and a decrease in sales of 10%. Very little impact on your profitability. However, you're actually doing 10% less work. So that may impact your wages bill. That's an interesting thing. If you increase prices by 20% to $12 and you only get a 10% decrease, then you've actually increased profitability by 17.5%, round numbers. You're actually taking home an extra $11.50 a day. So that's an interesting little calculation. You're doing less work, but actually making more money out of it. Now, of course, you could have inelastic demand, so you've put your price up by 20%. You're making a lot more money per burger, $8.50 per burger. However, you might get a 30% decrease in sales, which would mean you're only selling 7. And in that case, your profit falls by 8.5%. So it's interesting, those things that you kind of need to be thinking about. One of the things that I see quite often when we talk to restaurants about putting their prices up is the fact that often they'll get a very small in the volume that they're selling. Now, why is this important? So if you're a regular listener to the podcast, you'll know that we've spoken to, or some of our advice if you're dealing with one of the online ordering or the delivery aggregators, your DoorDash, your Grubhubs, your Just Eats. If they're charging you 35% commission to deliver, then why don't you put your price up 35%? The interesting thing is that you have almost a unitary difference here because we've seen people they put their prices up 35% and they've sold about 30% less items. However, their revenue stays about the same, which means that their profitability is much, much, much better and they're not working as hard. So this is critical when you think about the fact that, most of your orders are going to be coming in on a Friday and Saturday night. You're probably going to be constrained from a kitchen point of view anyway. So moving some of those away, particularly you don't want to be cooking stuff if you're going to be shipping it out the door at a loss. That's madness. So this is an example of where elasticity can be used in your restaurant. Where people don't actually pick up on the increase in sales, if you put the cost of your burger up by 20% and you only get a 10% decrease in the number of people who are ordering it, then you're increasing profit by 17.5%. which means that an extra $12.50 is flowing down to your bottom line. So that increase of 17% in your food profit, that can be huge for your profitability. I see, the thing I always find that's interesting with restaurants that are barely profitable, they are in such a sweet spot because of the fact that you only need to make a few changes, those little tiny 1%ers, and it makes a big difference to the profitability, assuming that you're doing decent revenue. If you're doing $500,000, $1 million a year, but you're not making any money, then a 1% increase can make a massive difference to your bottom line. If you increased your prices by 5% and you got a 1% decrease in the volume that you sold, so the unit number, if you're doing $1 million in turnover, that works out to be $66,000 in profit. So you're going to take a break-even restaurant and add $66,000. Now, obviously, not everyone's doing $1 million. I get that, but it's a nice round number. It's easy to work with. Work out what it is from there. If you need help with this sort of maths, hit me up on LinkedIn. Some days I'm getting 3 requests on LinkedIn a day from restaurant owners. Happy to, let me know what your turnover is and what it is, where it is that you want to be. The thing that I find really interesting is that we talk to a lot of people and we say, okay, so we need to make this is what we're kind of aiming for with our marketing plan. And so many people say that, oh, wow, you're the third marketing company that we've spoken to, when no one's ever asked us that question. They're always saying, what photos of our menu have you got and stuff like that. No, let's try and bring it back to the business case. Let's try and bring it back to what it is that you're trying to achieve. And if you're a break even, no one wants to have a break even restaurant where you're not able to pull a decent wage. Let's look at what we need to do to start turning that around. Next step. So we've talked about elasticity. So elasticity is if you're going to put your prices up, are you going to get a corresponding decrease in the volume that you sell? Next step. What are ways that you can increase your price? How do you minimize that elasticity? How do you make it non-elastic? Well, then that's how you make a demand-driven pricing model. So, and this is my question for you. Do you create commodities or do you create something that is unique? If it's unique, then I can't get it anywhere else. If you cook, and so a good example would be something like fish and chips. If your fish and chips, the chips that you've got are average to 3 other people who are cooking chips, and you charge $4.50 for it, then I can go anywhere, assuming that location isn't an issue. If I'm in the middle of 4 fish and chip shops, location probably isn't a big deal, which means that I could go and get it from anyone. And that means that if it's not any better, then I will probably go to the cheapest supplier. What about making it completely unique? So could it be beer battered? Could it be... Now, because we're now going to get back to, so what does the cost of beer battering do? Now, we've already talked about the costing. So how much extra labor is there? What's the spoilage and the ingredients that you're going to do? What's the holding cost of your inventory? Didn't mention that. What's the holding cost of your inventory? How much does it cost you if you've got $100 of inventory, it's in there all the time? You're funding that. There's a funding cost. And if you're running it off your credit card, it might be 20-25% that you're paying on that. So that's $25 a year. Now, obviously, you're going to have a little bit more inventory than 100, but I've used that because it's a simple number that everyone can sort of relate to. So what I would do there is I would aim to come up with a recipe that is the best recipe for chips, and then I would advertise that. We have the best chips. I might spend an extra 20 cents in a serving of chips for the beer batter, and I might use a slightly better oil. So I might push the cost up 30 cents, but I may be able to charge an extra 50 cents for it. I may be able to charge an extra $1 for it. Those numbers, they really start to add up, and that's where you can make quite a bit of profitability. So we've looked at the costing, we've looked at demand elasticity in restaurants, that's exciting, and we've looked at ways that you can sort of differentiate yourself. Anything that you can do to differentiate yourself is important. I always think you can buy a handbag at a market for $10, or you can buy a Prada handbag for $1,500. Why do people pay $1,500 for a Prada handbag? Well, it's relatively unique. There's a lot of things that go in there with that. Some restaurants charge a lot of money so that people can say, oh, look, my darling, beautiful wife, I have spent a lot of money taking you out. FYI, it's our anniversary tonight, so we're going out. That's going to be exciting. We've been married for a very long time, so I don't need to go and spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on my beautiful wife. I'm not sure if Tina will listen to this, hopefully not. We're still undecided as to where we go. Interesting, once again, we've been looking at places that we can go, and the number of places that make it difficult to book, the number of places that make it difficult to find out what's on the menu, it is the struggle. But for the right place, with the right food, I may be prepared to spend a couple of $100, go and splurge a bit. But yeah, there was a couple of places that I looked at, one of which, is charging $150 a head, and they don't even tell you what's on the menu. And it's going, well, I'm probably not even going to go there then. So you've got to think about it in the way of, what kind of product it is that you're selling. Commodity products and, things like petrol. Petrol is not differentiated. Or fuel, gas. Gas is not differentiated. Lots of gas retailers will try and say, we make the best fuel. They don't really. Well, they may or may not, but no one really cares. They're very much location and price driven because it's a commodity. Steel, coal, a commodity. Compare and contrast that with cars. So I could buy a 20-year-old car for $1,000, or I could buy a Ferrari for $500,000. They both get me from A to B, but there's a couple of things that make, obviously one's new, so that's something that's tangible that you can think about and put a value on. But even if I bought a new car, it's probably going to cost me $20,000, $30,000. I'm paying 20 times the price for the Ferrari. Why is that? There's something about it. Do you have Ferraris on your menu? That would be the next question. And how do you put a Ferrari? How do you build a Ferrari? That's a good question, isn't it? And we go back to that innovation and creativity. We want to make your pricing as inelastic as possible. So it means that if you're going to bump your price from $10 to $15, then you're going to sell just as many burgers. Too many people are cutting their price, hoping to bring in more, but they're actually not getting that much more increase in traffic because price is a signaler. Don't forget, if it's really expensive, then it's probably should be really, really good. If it's very, very cheap, then it's probably pretty crap. And so there'll be people who are price sensitive who will go for that. You're obviously making less money. There'll be people who are more quality driven and they're going to be looking for it. So the next thing that people do, the pricing methodologies that some people use is cost plus. So they might say for everything I need to make, if they're aiming for a 33% food cost, they're going to say if there's $1 worth of food in here, then I need to sell it for $3. And look, hey, that's one way of doing it. I don't think it's the right way. I think we can be a little bit smarter about it, but that is one way that of doing it. The other thing, at least you know that you've got profitable menu items in there, as long as you've accounted for things like spoilage and labour costs as well. The other way that people will cost their menu is that they will, the other way that they'll set the pricing is that they will look at what everyone else is charging and try and get away with it. Now, this can be really, really insidious, particularly where you've got the chef who's going to make a burger. And he goes, so I used to work at a fine dining restaurant, and so I get this Wagyu beef that is being fed in a green pasture, and so the meat's absolutely epic. It's aged for 90 days, and I get a buttermilk bun that we make on premise. And then, so there's an aioli. The aioli is made with some herbs that come from our garden. And I actually, I spend half an hour every morning making the aioli. It's super fresh. And we've got a bespoke cheese manufacturer as well that we buy our slices of cheese from. It's an amazing burger. I think it's one of the best burgers, within 100 kilometres of here. It's completely amazing. So you've got that burger story at one end of the spectrum, and then they go, there's 5 other places selling burgers, and they all charge $10, so I'm going to have to charge $10. That is a burger manufacturer who is going to go out of business very, very quickly. Now, I've been slightly flippant, and I've given the worst case scenario for our burger man. But I see this all the time. We do all of these things that make our menu really epic, but everyone's charging this for a butter chicken or for a Hawaiian pizza or for a burger, for a degustation menu. And the thing that I find amazing about this is that we then go back to how do you tell that story? And they go, well, what do you mean? Well, so you've just spent 5 minutes telling me about all of the effort that you've gone in to cook that burger, and yet I'm looking at your menu and you haven't written any of that down. None of that story is coming across. So why would I pay extra for it? Like, I want the burger that you've told me about because it sounds completely epic, but I'm not really going to pay any extra price for it because of the fact that you haven't actually told me about any of that stuff on the menu. So unless you're going to come out to each and every person who is at a table and go through that story, you're probably going to run into some problems. So you've got to be running your own race. Obviously, you've got to be looking at everyone else, but you don't know. They might be selling cheese that they bought from the supermarket. It might be the worst cut of meat ever. It might have ground up hooves in it or something that just makes it completely awful, and that's why they can sell a really cheap burger. You've got to run your own race. You've got to tell your own story. You can't compare like for like, and that's why this is what everyone else is charging. That doesn't, one of the biggest things I find is that, we're trying to pay everyone ethically. We're trying to pay the award wages. And it's like, well, that's great. What about the guy down the road who isn't? Now, if you're paying the award wages, then you're going to get the best people. Yeah? The people who work in your restaurant are going to be paid more than the people who are paid in the 3 other restaurants. They should be the best people because they're earning more. We go back to our pricing elasticity, that the same thing sort of goes for wages. You'll get better people if you're going to pay more money. So what is the product that you sell? It could be a part of it is the service. I was talking to a bakery and he said, we've got a great team. We work really hard on it and they're really super friendly. And now the interesting thing is they are. I've been in there, I've eaten one of their pies, epic, and, everyone is, hey, how's it going? It's got that country town bakery kind of feeling to it. That is really cool. So you need to be thinking about what your costs are. And this is why Cost Plus works. This is why charging what everyone else is charging doesn't work unless you're looking at what they're doing and then trying to come in and undercut them with cheaper inputs, cheaper labor. And I don't mean underpaying people. I mean, is there a way that you can produce the product quicker, smarter? What innovation and creativity are you going to come into that process to be able to do that? So there's a little bit of complexity in there. Now, I've spoken for way too long. We're going to leave it there. We're going to come back and we're going to start putting all of this together. We're actually going to talk about the strategy that you would use in your menu, because there are different kind of menu items and some of them will have different jobs. You've got to understand the jobs of the menu items. That's really critical. And then after that, we're actually going to start putting pen to paper and writing some of this stuff down. That's going to be pretty cool. So, yes, stay tuned for part 4 of the menu engineering when you include creativity and innovation. Yeah, that'll be part 4. I think we're going to be able to knock it over in one more episode. I didn't think we were going to be able to do it with this. But I hope everyone sort of understands it, because seriously, the number one thing that you could do is put your prices up by 5%, make a killing, dramatically increase your profitability, take a whole heap of stress off yourself, and probably none of your customers are going to notice. Wouldn't that be cool? That's about it. You have a glorious week, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Want more customers for your restaurant, cafe or takeout? Every month, our marketing tools and information are used by thousands of restaurant owners just like you to help them find more customers and turn them into repeat customers. All of our tools and information is designed specifically for restaurant owners. We know you don't have a lot of time to spend marketing or learning complicated procedures, so our tools are quick and easy to use. If you're looking to increase your revenue and profits or want to work less hours, check out marketingforrestaurants.com.